Welcome into another live episode of the Bully Ball Podcast on the Gold Standard Podcast Network. Where did it all go wrong for the 2024 49ers? Steph Sanchez and I will discuss that and more right after this. I'm Jason Aponte. That's Steph Sanchez. This is the Bully Ball Podcast on the Gold Standard Podcast Network. Tuesday, December 3rd. Steph Sanchez, how are you doing aside from plumbing issues?
Oh, come on. that was a backstage conversation.
Oh,
Handyman
okay. Well,
may come over.
It's all good when you want to call me out about the Dynasty League, which, by the way, I've won 5 in a row and my team is cooking. So like, don't play with the boys.
I lost this past week because of Jerry Jeudy. Thanks for that.
Ooh,
but yeah,
I love me a good revenge game, man. He said he wanted to beat Denver's ass, and boy, did he! Wow.
Except for the winning the game part, but aside from that, he made his point. So
that's it. Yeah, that's it. Honestly,
but speaking of plumbing issues, the 49ers could probably use some work as well.
Yeah, and you know what? And that's a good way to start because we're trying to figure out what. Yeah, no, like this is perfect. This is what's called a transition in the in show business. The 49ers now are leaking everything everywhere, right? But how does that start? One little thing that you don't take care of bleeds into another thing, bleeds into another thing, bleeds into another thing, and now all of a sudden you've got full-blown issues. And I think that's what the crux of this episode is. I don't want to talk about the Buffalo Bills game. I think that's been discussed ad nauseum. And it doesn't matter. There's nothing to really add. There's nothing to add. The 49ers got their ass beat again. And, that's 2 straight weeks. There's nothing to add. But with the last 5 weeks and in December, this is a time for reflection of your life, of your year, everything, because it's about to be a new year. And I think that's a perfect place to start with this episode. And when we look at it, obviously, there's going to be many issues, but I wanted to start first with just the 49ers offense with some of the numbers that, we were able to find. So in 2023, the 49ers averaged 2.69 points per drive, 67.2% red zone touchdown rate, 33.5% TD rate, 10.1% turnover rate. The offensive rates in 2024, 2.08 points per drive. That's a 22.7% decline from 2023. 48.9% red zone TD rate, 20.3% touchdown rate, 13% turnover rate. You can't have a dip in points per drive. You can't have a dip in red zone rate. You can't have a dip in touchdown rate. And you certainly can't have an increase in turnover rate. I think the one thing that we set ourselves to is, maybe the defense will take a step back, but the offense has got us. Even if they take a step back, that's not a step back. That's a leap back. So, Steph, what are your thoughts about those numbers and how eye-popping they are, considering where we are right now in week 14?
Yeah, I think early in the season, not having Christian McCaffrey, I think forced this offense and maybe even Kyle Shanahan to try to find an identity without him, which I think proved to be difficult and some might even say impossible. Although, I think Jordan Mason individually was great, but I think the cohesion of the entire offense that we saw with Christian McCaffrey there the year prior wasn't the same with Jordan Mason on the field for whatever reason, right? But I do think that is kind of at the root of some of the offensive issues early in the season. And then in the first few weeks, you also had Brandon Ayuk and Trent Williams, struggling to get into conditioned game-ready shape. So you're having to adjust for a number of different things at the same time. I think early on that was part of it. But I always say, you should be able to adjust from there. And for whatever reason, the 49ers just couldn't find a way to adjust. And, eventually the injuries start piling up as well. And so that makes it harder to then be able to adjust properly, even if you wanted to, right? And then Christian McCaffrey does come back And you still have some of those same issues, right? You still have like turnovers and you still have struggles in the red zone. So what gives? Like, was it just so long that he was out that it just became who they were, even when he was on the field? And even McCaffrey needed some time to, get back to himself as well. But I don't know. It's just, it was from the jump, it just kind of felt like this offense was discombobulated. A lot of what made them such a powerful offense the year prior took a back seat, right? Like, yak. We're in week 14 now, and we're still talking about the fact that the 49ers are like throwing screen passes at like the lowest rate, right? So like they went away from everything that had worked for them before for whatever reason. And I think they had an identity issue, and I'm not sure even now they've really found it.
Mm-hmm. And kind of funny that you bring that up. And we're going to have a larger discussion at the end of this about Brock Purdy, because we've got some eye-popping numbers too from last year to this year. But 3 games with Christian McCaffrey active, 6 yards average depth of target. 8 games prior to his debut, 9.5 yards average depth of target. And what's funny is so much of what the argument was for this offense was, the short throws, but don't let people get you out of what it is you do well, right? And when you start to pivot away from those things, yeah, you get these eye-popping throws, but you start to get away from the things that made you successful. Mm-hmm. And what worked, what is going on with this team now, is a little bit of a transformation. You're watching guys not get separation, and you're watching the throws get more difficult down the field, and you're watching tighter windows, and the throws, the layups, everything that everybody always criticizes any 49ers quarterback for being a product of, the layups, the yards after the catch, all that's gone now. And what's the reason? Well, when you know that you're not afraid of separation down the field, safeties can play up a little bit further, so you can take away the run. Outside zone gets turned off. Well, now you can get away from that. Now you have to throw the football. And the way that you loosen up these running lanes is by throwing the football. And it gets you out of the things that you are successful at, what you've built this offense on, what you've built your identity on, which is running the football, beating people up, taking your calculated shots, as opposed to going down the field a lot and trying to transform yourself to, I wouldn't say quieting the naysayers, but almost to prove a point. It felt like this season. I can do this. We can do this. But at the sacrifice of what makes you successful and is putting you in a spot that is behind the sticks, when you're having deeper routes develop and guys are holding and you're having these issues, and now you're on 2nd and 15, you're behind the sticks. All of these things are together. Now, couple that with the fact that the 49ers are 20th in turnovers. They're 27th in turnover differential. They don't take the ball away, but they get the ball taken away from them, as evidenced all season. I'm not even just going to talk about this Buffalo Bills game. So when you look at the way that this offense is built, you're away from the things that have been successful. You aren't executing, and you're taking bigger risks that aren't always coming to fruition. Like, we get excited when we see Brock throw the football down the field, and we're like, look, there it is, but that's not the way that you want him to play, nor anybody else named outside of like maybe Mahomes and Allen and Lamar, and Burrow. Like, everyone else has to play in the constructs of their offense. Everyone else has to be point guards. And when people call quarterbacks point guards, it's something that is viewed as a negative. But it shouldn't be, because that's not the way the quarterback position should be evaluated, right? You've got your tier of your big guys, and then everybody else is all the same pretty much at this point. So for me, it's getting away from the things that you were successful at while not executing. And, let's just put it out there in the red zone, the play calling not as creative. I mean, when George Kittle is the reason, has 15 red zone receptions, 8 red zone touchdowns, both are highs in the NFL. Imagine where this offense in the red zone would be without him, and how many times they wouldn't be able to score points. Like, he's literally saving this already putrid touchdown rate in the red zone. So it's a bunch of things. It's a bunch of things. And that's the point of this exercise in this episode. Everyone wants to blame one thing. Everyone wants to blame one issue. Everyone wants to have a finger to point to say that's the problem. And when we get rid of that problem, everything's going to be fine. But I think the exercise is to let you know that there are many problems that need to be fixed. A lot of things have gone wrong. And it starts with the one thing that we thought we could set our watch to, which was the offense, Steph.
That's the craziest part of it all. Like, and before we go into the defensive numbers, because a lot has been said about the defense, right? I'll just preface that topic with acknowledging that this defense, the personnel, the drop off in personnel from even 2023 to 2024, I think is stark. And you got to remember, for a first-year defensive coordinator, I think it's going to be even more amplified, right? Now, at the same time, I think, the Bills running the same running play and it having success throughout that entire game, like, that's inexcusable as well. We got to look to the defensive coordinator for that. There weren't any answers. But at the same time, I think we also have to acknowledge the personnel hasn't been there. Again, this is before injuries even started snake biting this season. I would say that was kind of an issue with this team. And then also, like, Fred, I mean, getting hurt in as early as week 4, we all noticed that drop off. And we know how much Fred alone can kind of like raise that ceiling of this defense, right? So him being hurt and him being limited to what he has been since then, I think has also hurt the defense. But yeah, it's to me, I have a hard time giving any excuses then to the offense, because this is the same offense that was firing on all cylinders just a season ago, aside from Christian McCaffrey, who is a big part of 2023. I'm not taking that away from them at all. But again, with what Jordan Mason was giving you, you should still be able to put up points. This team was getting to the red zone at a healthy rate, top 5 for like a good part of the season. Still couldn't find a way to score points. And then it kind of just dominoed from there to where we are now. And, it's just inexcusable, I think, for this offense to be where it's at. Again, before injuries really kind of took a hold of this team, I think they had a way to get out of it. And now it's just it's too much.
Here's something to lament, kind of what you're saying too with the injury problems. So 11 starters, and we're just talking about offense. 11 starters on offense. You ready? Here's I'm going to go player by player from the last 11 players that were playing against the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Brock Purdy misses 1 game with right shoulder soreness. Christian McCaffrey missed all but 4 games, out for the season. Kyle Juszczyk played in all 12. Brandon Ayuk will miss 10 games after a torn ACL, MCL. Deebo Samuel missed a game, left another game after 4 snaps with pneumonia. George Kittle's missed 2 games. Trent Williams missed 2 games, who's dealing with something that is outside of football. And Trent, take your time, honestly, at this point. I really don't have any, rush for you to come back at all. Take care of your family. Aaron Banks has missed the game. Jake Brendel's played all 12. John Feliciano hasn't played at all this year and won't. And Colton McKivitz has played all 12. So you do have a large contingency back from those teams. But given the offseason drama, given all of the guys trying to work back, it doesn't feel the same thing. It doesn't feel like the same thing. Obviously Feliciano took over at the end of the year. Okay, we replace him with Pooney. That's an upgrade. So you can kind of throw that one out. But when you look up and down and you're looking at these teams, it's Brandon Ayuk out for the year, basically. Deebo Samuel just not playing like himself, and he has to admit that at this point. George Kittle has been phenomenal. He's missed 2 games. Christian McCaffrey, the same thing. It's just couple the fact of all of the bad things that we're talking about when it comes to the play calling, execution. Then you throw all this injury stuff into it. It's just all bad for the offense. And we thought the offense was going to be the way that this team can offset defensive shortcomings, special teams shortcomings. It's what a lot of teams have to do, particularly when the bag goes to a quarterback. You're asking that quarterback and that offense to say, listen, we got to lose some people on defense, but we need you to lift us. And that's kind of the crux of that argument, which we'll get to at the end. But let's talk about defense. Kyle Shanahan said he's happy with Nick Sorensen. I want you to react to that first.
I think that's kind of what he has to say to a certain extent. I'll also add this, that like, these last few weeks, much of this season, there have been people pointing out the fact that Steve Wilkes' defense statistically has been better than Nick Sorensen, and that is fact, right? Again, I'm not going to repeat what I said a little bit ago about the personnel being different. I will remind people that several players, several veterans on this team last year were outspoken about the coaching. You haven't heard any of that this season for the defense. So that to me is the biggest difference, right? So I think, you got to give a first-year defensive coordinator some type of vote of confidence with what's been going on. There's been a lot of injuries on the defensive side as well. It's really the defense that started with a lot of the injuries early in the season. And again, we're talking about the fact that the personnel wasn't that good to begin with. The depth was tested early. You had rookies, starting. And so I think that's been an adjustment, right? To add on to the fact that this was already going to be a big learning curve for Nick Sorensen. I think keeping all of that into perspective, that's probably what Kyle is considering in his assessment of Sorensen. Now, whether that's enough to keep him beyond 2024, like that's a different discussion. I've seen people, entertain Jeff Ulbrich and all those things.
Matt Maiocco keeps mentioning him. That should not be ignored.
And he was a heavy name that was being discussed. Like Tim K was throwing him out a lot, even last cycle as well. So that we can't ignore the fact either that this was like the 49ers' third, fourth choice as far as defensive coordinators go, if that. So yeah, we'll see what happens after this season. But I think given the circumstances, it's just hard. I think it's hard to assess Nick Sorensen for that reason.
All right. Just raw numbers, and then I've got, my own thoughts about the defense. The 49ers, 4th in passing yards, 5th in yards allowed, 11th turnovers, 11th passing touchdowns, 15th in rushing yards, 16th in fourth downs, 24th in points, 26th in third downs, 28th fourth quarter scoring, 31st rushing touchdown, 31st red zone. Here's my concern. DeMeco, Wilkes, Sorensen, and now who? 4 straight years, you're going to have a different defensive coordinator. And I think the biggest mistake for Kyle during this coaching cycle was hiring someone who needed to run the same things that they wanted to run, not overhaul the system. Wide 9, we're going to run all these same things. Lot of zone, we're going to keep it this way. You may see subtle tweaks, but every defensive coordinator that comes in here has to abide by the defensive scheme that they want to run. And now you're going to maybe, and who knows, it could be, that Kyle, loosens the rope a little bit and says, you know what, we need to overhaul this whole thing, especially given your personnel. The secondary we all thought was going to be improved. It absolutely 100,000% has been improved. The only thing that we didn't see coming was that Jair Brown has regressed terribly. Linebacker, we knew it was going to be a struggle because it was going to be Fred and somebody else. Defensive line, the 49ers were going with their stars and scrubs mentality of, okay, Bosa and Hargrave got us, and then we're going to rotate everybody else in. And that falls apart when depth has to play more. So my issue is this. My biggest issue with Kyle in this coaching cycle is you demanded that whoever comes in here has to abide by the same defensive scheme that you have. Evolution needs to happen. And what you're seeing across the NFL is defenses are punching back against offenses. That's why scoring is down. That's why you're seeing only 1 or 2 teams that are really running it up. That's why you're seeing struggles offensively with teams that you shouldn't normally see. Defenses are punching back. You have to punch back as well, too. And when you're using the same defensive scheme that you're using for past years without the personnel, it becomes, it cracks and it cracks and it cracks, and it shows more and more and more. And what happens is now you're going to have your 4th defensive coordinator in 4 years, and you've got to loosen the rope and let this guy play and tailor the scheme to the personnel. Scheme doesn't dictate personnel. Personnel dictates scheme, in my opinion. You can't just sit back and rush 4 all the time when you don't have a defensive line that can get there. And you can't run man if your secondary is terrible. You have to find a way to find balance. And it just all can't be, we're sticking with this. You've got to come in and run this. That's my biggest concern with the defense. And I think one of the bigger mistakes this offseason with Kyle Shanahan was, we need somebody who's going to continue to run the things that we're running, regardless if your personnel cannot dictate that scheme stuff.
Well, I do think, like, to a certain extent, Kyle was kind of in a difficult spot. One, because of the narrowed options that he had. Right. So many no's, I just discussed that. But also the fact that, like I said, players were open about doing different things last season. And maybe it was because those different things didn't quite work or jive with the personnel that they did have. But I do think some of that did influence Kyle in saying, okay, this defense is very particular about what they want to do, what they think they do best. I got to protect that. And anyone that comes in, and I think that's, it would depend who it was, right? Like, let's just say Bill Belichick entertained the idea and came in as defensive coordinator. I think he would have let Bill Belichick do what he wanted.
Right. You think Shanahan's going to say, hey, Bill, you gotta run this wide nine stuff. He's going to be like, go to hell.
Yeah, take a hike, buddy. Yeah. So, like, I think when you have someone who didn't have as much experience, right, that you're not comfortable calling the shots and changing things up, which Sorensen, like, he had been here for a couple of years now. So it was like, okay, this is someone who at least could keep some continuity. That's why I think he was on the short list and at the back end of the short list of candidates for this team, because I do think there was some sensitivity around changing too much, especially when you think about the fact this was like a run it back year. Let's just try to do the same thing, not change too much, see how it goes for us. Well, now we know, like, you can't run it back that much. Insanity. What the definition of insanity again? I say it all the time on this show. Yeah.
Doing the same things over and over and expecting a different result.
So this year we're getting the negative result of that. And so, yeah, I kind of do feel like Kyle's hands were tied a little bit in that.
Sensible, very, very level-headed take from Steph, as usual, when it comes to that. Now, I think if there's even a chance that they bring back Nick Sorensen, I think this fan base is going to, stage of mutiny.
They'll be up in arms.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. What would you say is the percentage that Nick Sorensen returns for a second year?
I'm gonna wait to see how this season ends, but right now I'd say like 50 to 40%.
Okay.
And it might be higher.
Now, the reason that I say that is all right. Well, Rob says 1%. I see 0.
13.
You know what? You know what I know? The one thing I know for a fact is that Kyle Shanahan does not give a shit what we think at all, despite the fact that we bullied him out of Mac Jones, which, by the way, great job, guys.
Bullying works.
Really, really dodged the bullet, man. Bullying does work at times. He doesn't give a shit what we think. He doesn't give a shit what outside noise thinks. So Robert Saleh in 2017, oh my God, you got to get him out of here. Or 2018, got to get him out of here. He doesn't know what he's doing. Well, they were derelict of talent. And then you let him get a bunch of talent. And then 2019, you bring in Nick Bosa and you bring in Dee Ford and your defense turns the corner. So I don't know if maybe that's exactly what Kyle is thinking right now. But I do know for this one thing for sure is that Kyle Shanahan does not give a shit about anything that we ever have to say. No, and Jay, and I love the name Jay, he didn't listen to us. Josh Dobbs was there because that game was going to be not throwing the football, and Josh Dobbs could run the football with his legs and put pressure on zone read. That's not a game that you throw Brandon Allen into. They weren't intent on throwing the football at all in that game. So Josh Dobbs was elevated to number 2. Trust me, Kyle Shanahan was not going through Twitter like, damn, these people might have a point about Josh Dobbs. He does not give a shit what we think. Let's just say that.
We can't bully him into everything. All right.
No, we can just bully him out of drafting Mac Jones. I think that was, again, applause to you guys.
We'll take that.
We did a great job. But yes, so I think it's a little bit of give and take. Again, when you hear Kyle talking, he's talking about, considering everything that's going on, he likes it. Remember in the offseason or in the preseason, it was kind of funny that everybody was wondering why Kyle Shanahan wasn't calling plays. And everyone was like, is he going to get a new play caller? No. It's because he wanted to sit and listen to Nick Sorensen. Right. And it's very clear through those 3 preseason games that he felt fine with what he was going with. And he understood, right? And we go back to last season with Wilks. Kyle was much more involved, especially in halftime adjustments with Steve Wilks, like going to him and saying, this is how we fix it. This is what we do, those things, right? So it's a give and take. I think everybody is going to say, yeah, we want Sorensen gone, but I think you're fooling yourself if you believe that Kyle Shanahan cares what we think and isn't going to do what he wants to do. So,
Jay, I got a question for you because I've seen this narrative or conspiracy pop up, and there's some coincidences there, right? I mean, bringing in Brandon Staley because he has experience, defensive coordinator, all of that, to help Nick Sorensen, to help this secondary and all that. And I do think the secondary did take a liking to Brandon Staley, in particular Lenore, actually. Still, I think a lot of people were drawing the comparison between the 49ers not being able to finish games, in particular the defense giving up a lot of scoring in the fourth quarter and not being able to finish games, and to Chargers, Brandon Staley's Chargers, and having that same issue and not being able to finish games, giving them up in the fourth quarter, particularly with the defense. Is there anything to that, or is that just a crazy coincidence?
The people who hated the signing are just going to go ahead and just
it's like it confirmed biases.
Preconceived notions are all the rage. So look, the thing is this: you can point to that and just say, "Ha, I told you," but we don't know what the hell Brandon Staley's doing. Nobody's ever actually given us any sort of real reason what he's doing there, what he's actually doing. Every time anyone's been asked, remember with Sorensen, like, what's the role of Staley? And he's just like, just overseeing stuff. Well, what on earth does that mean? What on earth does that mean? So they've been very, very vague with what his role is. For all we know, Brandon Staley's getting the donuts for everybody. For all we know, Brandon Staley's up in the booth and he's just got his feet up. We have no idea. But I do think the same like preconceived notions that people have had about Brandon Staley and choking, everybody's just like, yeah, there it is, but we have no idea what he's doing. If he's doing nothing, then it's not him. If he's doing a lot, then it might be him, but it's just hard to know until we figure this out. But yeah, it's pretty funny that I'm glad you brought that up, because that's really funny. Because people were just like,
we have no idea.
They hated it. They hated it from the rip. And I was just like, guys, Anthony Lynn was literally the assistant, was the head coach of the Chargers. They blew games. They brought him in. You did not care at all. But now, because Brandon Staley's here, now all of a sudden, it's ridiculous.
And nobody knew what the hell Anthony Lynn was
doing. Running backs coach. At least he was running backs coach. And he had to answer questions.
But as soon as Turner came back, like, what was he doing then? Like,
right. That's what I'm saying. Know. Like, until we know fully what he's doing, he could be doing nothing. He could be doing everything. It doesn't matter. Like, that's the furthest thing from my mind right now. Was like, we've got to get Brandon Staley out of this building. The furthest thing out of my mind, man. All right. So I guess we can't talk about the San Francisco 49ers season without injuries. And right now, this is so 2020. And it's crazy because that's all we talked about all offseason. It's just like vibes are off, and we're a big vibes podcast. We're probably the biggest vibe podcast on this entire network. Rob, if we're not, put yes or no on the bottom here. Vibes were off. Holdouts. Christian McCaffrey gets hurt week 1. 1,000% yes. Good job. But injuries are a part of this story. You lose Javon Hargrave for the season. You lose Brandon Ayuk. Dre Greenlaw still not back. Christian McCaffrey's out for the season again. Now Jordan Mason's hurt. Trent Williams is dealing with the tragedy. So is Charvarius Ward, who just came back. Those are things that the human element that cannot be, is not something that can be measured with any sort of metric, right? Hufanga. It just over and over again. Like we saw Nick McLeod playing football on Sunday, right? For everybody that's like, what number? Who is that? That was Nick McLeod, special teams guy. He was playing. You can't tell the story of this season without talking about injuries. Again, it's not one thing and nothing else. It's all of these things. And that's the point of this exercise. It's everything. It's everything. It's injuries. It's offense. It's defense. It's special teams. It's coaching. It's execution. It's effort. This is your 2024 49ers. So let's stop looking for one thing and let's highlight everything, because it is all of these things. Injuries definitely plays a part in this. And how many of these injuries are just like, it goes through the room. And I know you go to the booth and you go to the press conferences and you talk to everybody and you say, next man up, next man's got to do their job. These are impact injuries. These guys realistically are probably looking at it like, we are going to try our best, but we know we can't get this done, right? Like you can try. And I love that whole next man up, man. Yeah, it's a team game, and any given Sunday. It's not any given Sunday when you're missing Nick Bosa, Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey. Like, it's not any given Sunday. There is no any given Sunday when it comes to that. That's something that people tell themselves to make themselves feel better going into games that they know that they can't win. Because 1 out of 100 times somebody wins, and you see, any given Sunday. But look at this list. And how can any team function with these many injuries, let alone this many impact injuries, Steph?
So on the topic of injuries, I do feel like early on in the season, it may be up until the bye week, I would say like that was a cop-out to explain what was happening
100%,
with this team.
100%. And also, real quick, before you get into this, the Lions are missing about 15, 16 of their guys from the 53-man roster. Yeah. And I see the Chiefs had impact injuries. They're 10-1. They have Patrick Mahomes. And they have the blood magic of the refs. Please do not compare the two, because that's not the same. Go.
Yeah. So early, I thought it was a cop-out. I do agree that it's a lot of things going on with this team. The injuries aren't the only thing. So when people mention just one specific thing, whether it's the defense, whether it's the offense, whether it's the injuries, I'm not listening, because it's all of those.
Yes.
There was a certain point in the season where I think the 49ers could overcome injuries. At that same time, though, they were dropping games they very well should have been winning. They put themselves behind the 8 ball. They put themselves in a position where, okay, now we have to win every game. Every game is a must win. We have all this urgency. That is when the injuries really started to pile up. You're not going to be able to win some must win games, at least like not the amount that you need, when all of these injuries pile up, which is why I was so pissed off at this team for starting the way they did when they were relatively healthy enough to compete, to be in games, and to ultimately lose and still give us the same, well, we've been here before, so we can do it again. In order to do it again, you need a lot of things on your side. You need health. You need other teams in your division, in your conference, to also lose. And you yourself need to win games. So all those things didn't go the 49ers' way this season, along with the shitty way that they started the season. So that's why you're at this point now where there's way too many injuries for this team to overcome. And that's it. Like, what can you do at this point? There's really nothing you can do but look forward to 2025. In a way, it could be a blessing in disguise that we can look forward to 2025 because and put this season behind us and stop we could technically still win the NFC West if this and this happens. With all these injuries, I think everyone kind of knows, like, okay, that ain't happening. So now let's look at the rest of this season with an eye towards 2025. Like, now you're forced to do that. Now we're going to see Isaac Guerendo is RB1. Put in your waiver request for Isaac Guerendo if you haven't picked them up already. Put them on your fab. Use up all of the fab you have left.
Hey.
Too loud?
Too loud. There's one game before the playoffs. There's a lot of people that are here struggling. We all didn't clinch, right?
Yeah, so I'm excited though. I'm looking forward to seeing some of these guys. It's like let's just see what some of these guys, these depth guys, could do.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the point of a tweet that I sent out yesterday, is that organizationally, you can say all these things about, we're still in it, but you have to really look yourself in the eye. And it goes back to what we were talking about the other day about, or 2 episodes ago, whatever it was, about how the 49ers kind of told us at the trade deadline, not that they were just happy with, their roster. They almost were like, we don't think we're gonna get a guy that can move the needle, like, at any point, right? Like, and just let it go. Case 49 says, when's the last time Mike Tomlin has had a losing season? When's the last time Mike Tomlin won a playoff game? That's gonna shock you. That's the one you should look up. If Mike Tomlin was 8 years ago, that correct? Ding, ding, ding. That's 2016. Crazy. If that was Kyle Shanahan, boy, oh boy, what would you be saying? And the only reason he's not fired is because it's Pittsburgh. They just allow them to coach until they're retired. So don't give me that one. But yes, it's time right now for the 49ers to look at who you've got, because there is going to be a huge roster turnover. I think we know a few things. Lenoir, Green, Malik Mustafa, you're here to stay. Right? Jair Brown, what do we do? Does this put you in a spot where Hufanga's on a prove-it 1-year deal? The actual offensive line, right? You see Jalen Moore play. Jalen Moore's been great in Trent's spot. Ben Bartch was really good. Pooney's been good. Brendel can't be here. Where's Nick Sakel? Because it can't be worse. Where's Nick Sakel? Where's Nugent? Right? It's so to the point that if you can't look in the mirror and say, we're cooked at 5-7, we need to figure out who's part of the problem here and who's going to be part of the solution next year, that you're almost delusional. That you're almost bordering on mishandling this whole thing. You can look at us and say all you want. We're 1 game out. We're 2 games out. We're this, we're that. We can do this. If we win. No. You have to figure out who's going to be on this team next year. Because I think we know Banks is gone. Mooney's gone.
Yep.
Right? A lot of people are going to, I think the Debo discussion is only going to grow in this offseason. Unfortunately, they blew their window to really cash in on moving Debo. Now it's just pennies on the dollar. But you have to figure out who's a part of the problem for this year and who's a part of the solution for next year. And you have a really good rookie class that we feel really good about. I think Ricky Pearsall is the only question mark right now. And I think we all can give him grace based on the fact that he survived a gunshot and this offense is just not good right now. Like, and everything as well too. And he just needs more time. So I'm willing to give him grace. And you have another draft class in which you're about to inject more youth into this team and possibly need them to start right away. But you got to figure out the spots right now. And you've got to figure out who's a part of the problem for this year and who's a part of the solution for next year. That's just my take on it.
That's why I'm like, is the remaining games and all these injuries that they're dealing with, it's low key, high key, a blessing in disguise, because you're now forced to do that. No more hanging on to a thread of hope, and it was a thin ass thread, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
So now you're forced into that situation, and I think it could be good.
All right. Let's get to it because I know everybody wants to talk about it. Here's how we're going to end this one out. And obviously, at the end, Rob can put up the schedule again so we can go through it.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I know. Oh, God is right. Speaking of solution moving forward, Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy's going into his 4th year. The going rate for a quarterback is $60 million. This year hasn't gone the way that we want, but here I'm going to point out some numbers and we'll talk through it. Since 2022, with Brandon Aiyuk and Christian McCaffrey both on the field, Brock Purdy has 535 plays, 0.29 expected points added per play. Remember, you want to be positive on offense. You want to be negative or whatever. I don't even know how it works, but you just want to be positive. 1 on the field, meaning either Aiyuk or McCaffrey, 578 plays, 0.11. Still good. Both off the field, 147 plays, 0.09. It's a much smaller sample size of plays with both off the field, and most quarterbacks would decline if you took away 2 all-pro level weapons, right? That seems fair. But to put context between those EPA per play figures, 0.29 would rank first this season. Josh Allen is 0.26, and I think right now he's probably leading the MVP charge. 0.11 would rank 12th this season. Patrick Mahomes is 0.12. Negative 0.09 would rank 23rd this season. Dak Prescott is at that same number. There is context to everything that we have to talk about with Brock. And I'm tired of everybody talking about, well, Brock needs all these guys. Everyone needs someone because everyone was crying for Patrick Mahomes when all his receivers got hurt. And, oh, well, that's why they can't. No. Everyone needs someone. Peyton Manning wasn't throwing to mailboxes. He was throwing to Reggie Wayne, Marvin Harrison, and Dallas Clark. He had Edgerrin James, and he had Marshall Faulk. He wasn't throwing to nobodies. Tom Brady, early on in his career, was much more of a game manager. They had a phenomenal defense. Tom Brady gets Randy Moss, and he starts breaking records. Tom Brady gets Godwin and Mike Evans. They win a Super Bowl. Brett Favre wasn't throwing to mailmen. Neither was Aaron Rodgers. Nobody can win without any help. So let's stop. But the discussion begins and ends with this, and this is what I was talking about. When a quarterback takes up that much of your salary cap, you and the offense have to lift everything else that you're going to lose as a result of the money. Steph, everyone is worried about this money, and now we thought we saw ourselves clear of talking about quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins has entered the chat. Aaron Rodgers has entered the chat. I don't know what year it is anymore because it seems like it's every single year. But man, this is going to be we are going to beat each other up all offseason and all the way through, right?
Yeah, I mean it's coming, right? And we're the noise and the discourse around this has gotten louder by the week. The shoulder injury certainly did not help either. I'm with you, Jay. Every quarterback needs somebody. You can't have mailmen out there.
Matt Ryan needed Julio. Like, come on, I can go through every single quarterback who's ever played the game. So don't do this.
No CMC and no Brandon Aiyuk, and yet you still have somebodies though. You still have George Kittle. You still have Deebo Samuel. You have a first-round wide receiver in Ricky Pearsall. Jordan Mason was doing fine. He can catch balls out of the backfield as well. So I don't know. I think, yes, we got to put into perspective that every quarterback needs somebody, but at the same time, I think we can look at Brock's drop-off without those 2 guys or even without one of them and say he's not the type of quarterback top 5. And yet there's not a lot of quarterbacks that can overcome and carry. That's why there's only 5. That's why elite. This is why people didn't like people throwing around the word elite to begin with.
Yes.
Because elite comes with the expectation that if you are missing a guy like a Brandon Aiyuk, your wide receiver 1, and you're missing one of the best running backs in the game, that an elite quarterback could still raise the ceiling of your offense single-handedly, right? That's elite, right? I think this season has proven that Brock Purdy is not an elite quarterback. And it's okay if that's kind of all that this season has proven. I think he's still a good quarterback. I think he's a quarterback deserving of an extension. Mm-hmm. But the 60 million, and we say this all the time, right? Like we're not the ones writing the checks. So it's like,
not my money.
It's not my money. But like you gotta ask me personally. Like I
love it. So say
if I were the one,
say the line. I'm not paying him that. Yeah, you aren't, and you can't. So don't worry about it. I love that. I don't feel comfortable paying Brock that you're not.
But
don't worry
I have opinions though. I have opinions. It's worth $0, and I'll just say that I wouldn't be comfortable paying Brock Purdy the 60 million plus. Mm-hmm. That was thrown out there, early in the season. And I think that's fair. I think that's fair. And I think both things could be true, right? Mm-hmm. I do think Brock Purdy is going to be extended by this team. Mm-hmm. How much he gets paid, that is yet to be seen. And I think we've been saying much of this season ever since like the bye week. We were like, the second half of the season is going to kind of give us a better idea of what Brock Purdy is and isn't and what he should be paid. Mm-hmm. I've seen people like throw out, you can only commit to him like 2 years, mm-hmm. which that would be great if he would accept that. But I don't think like he or his agent would accept that, a 2-year deal in the league, or mm-hmm. sorry, not his second deal in the league, his first big extension in the league. So that's kind of what, the 49ers have to deal with this offseason. I think it'll get done, but the question is how much. The other thing with the 2-year deal that I think has some flaws, if that's even something that's a possibility, is that then you won't be able to do the thing that the 49ers love to do, which is stagger out the cap hits and have them grow with the years. So if it's 2 years, you're going to be paying like X amount for each of those 2 years. Whereas if it's 3 or 4, you can stagger it out and it'll grow with each. Usually the first 2 years of the deal, very team friendly, very cheap, and you can figure some things out along the way. With the way that the 49ers are kind of looking, I guess, like having to somewhat not rebuild, but like retool this roster a little bit, and having already given a lot of big money extensions to some other guys that they clearly are going to need for Brock Purdy to be successful. I think having that staggered out extension, makes the most sense, where like the first 2 years of his deal, you can afford to keep all those guys around him.
Yeah, and I like, is it Rad's Rips? I'm sorry if I got the name wrong. No other team is so dependent on the scheme. Once the scheme is figured out, everyone looks worse. And what's funny is we felt that the scheme was figured out with the Rams, and Sean McVay said, I can't do this with Jared Goff anymore. And he went out and he got Matthew Stafford. So there is a little chicken and egg issue here with that. The other problem, because I love this comment because it's true. Like it's a few things are true. Is McVay's exposed after the 3-point Super Bowl showing, and then they have a bad year, whatever, and then he's like, I can't do this anymore. And he evolved the offense, but you can only evolve when you have a quarterback who can execute it to the level that Stafford can. The other problem is the people around him that have worse numbers or are similar players and have similar roles in their offense that are making so much money. Tua, Goff, Dak, all of these guys, right? Like that we all look at in the same tier. And by the way, when we talk about quarterbacks, and I think this is the easiest way because everyone wants to rank, quarterbacks. Ranking them seems silly. Putting them in tiers is how you do it. Mahomes, Allen, Lamar by themselves. Burrow, and then everybody else week to week. We all thought CJ Stroud was the next coming, regressed. We all thought this guy every week you can move guys up and down. It's all interchangeable. You know who has the most passing touchdowns since in the last 2 years? Baker Mayfield. Now, that's a contract that if Brock wanted to agree with, I would be thrilled with. like a 2-year, $40 million deal, something like that, that would be phenomenal, because then it affords you all this other flexibility to do what you want. Again, it's going to be up to Brock, and it's going to be up to this organization. Do we commit this amount of money to a guy who has a case and says, look at all these other guys and look at what they've done and look at what I've done, and would you rather have them than me? And that's a discussion for fans, not the teams, because obviously that can't happen. Or do the 49ers just break clear of it because they feel that they've seen enough? And that's going to make this whole discussion so much harder to deal with this entire offseason between fans, analysts alike, is we don't know what they're thinking. And I think, again, if Brock says, I want the going rate because look at what all these guys have done and look at what I've done, and I've literally put up better numbers or similar numbers, fine. But if Brock can see himself clear of saying, you know what, let me do it for a year or two or whatever on this deal, and he doesn't have to. Remind you, I'm player first because this is the NFL. We're watching horrible things across the league happen to people who are not going to be able to, that's why when guys hold out and you're like, what a diva. No, it's because when his knee explodes and you don't want him anymore and you cut him, he doesn't have anything to help his family out with. So I'm always pro player. So Brock can do whatever he wants. I've got no horse in this fight. I'm good. You know what I mean? But ideally, a 2-year, $45 million deal, something to that extent, make it all guaranteed.
Yeah.
Make it all guaranteed with incentives. I think that'll be fine. So I just think that this discussion is loaded. I think a lot of it is hard to evaluate. Is he the guy that you saw last year? Is he the guy that you saw this year? What do you put more stock into? I think that's going to be the hard part. And I think that's always been the weird evaluation process with Brock from anyone, is he's the last pick in the draft. He can't be doing this. The fall off is coming. It's almost like people want the fall off to come so it can, again, confirm their preconceived notions and their draftism. But the 49ers have a tough decision to make here. And I don't I don't relish them being in that position. Like, I wouldn't want to be in that position. I don't want to, because there's so many people in that locker room that ride for him, that love him, that have been to the biggest game of their life with him. He's a stand-up guy. He's a guy that you don't have to worry about. You can put him in the locker room, and you know that he's not going to do anything wrong. All of those things matter, but at the end of the day, it's what are you willing to invest in? And I think that's the hard part, and I think year to year, aside from the top guys that I mentioned, Lamar, Allen, Mahomes, Burrow, everybody fluctuates up and down. And there's just this tier of great quarterbacks, elite ones. That's why they're elite. And then everybody else. And every single week, I can say, this guy's ahead of this guy. Goff's ahead of this guy. Okay, next week, now this guy's ahead of Goff. That's just where we are at the position. Trevor Lawrence, like, you're up, you're down. Like, the thing is the Super Bowl window is not closed. It's closing. But what's closed is your Super Bowl window of winning with a quarterback who is super cheap. That's your window, and that's what made this season so imperative, was winning when your quarterback was this cheap, because you could keep the Avengers around him. And now the Bills come, and you've got to make tough decisions. And I don't envy anybody that has to be in that position.
Yeah, and as Rob kind of said in the background chat here, he just said, whatever the decision is, make it by March. Yeah, if we can just have this done quickly
before the draft.
I mean, ideally, yes, because hopefully the 49ers learn their lesson as to why you should not wait till the 11th hour to get your deals done. I think it did impact the start of their season. Like, can't really argue against that at this point. And having your quarterback, in training camp and OTAs is pretty important. So hopefully they do get this deal done quickly and there isn't too much back and forth. It's going to be an interesting and fun off season. We are going to hear the other names. Let me ask you this, Jay.
What? I hope it's
now there in the past, like when Jimmy Garoppolo was on this team, had his extension already, but started dealing with the injuries. The 49ers started selling us on this idea of, well, we need a better backup. Don't mind the guy behind the curtain. We just need a really good backup that can start. And that's kind of like how they dress it up, right? Like, don't mind him. And what led people to think, oh, the 49ers aren't sold on Jimmy Garoppolo, but a lot of it I think was motivated by the injuries that Garoppolo dealt with. Now you have Brock, who the UCL shoulder, he's had like a rib injury, which he did play through, right? So I won't put that too much against him. But do you kind of see Brock going down the same path where it's like the 49ers need to have an excuse and say we need a better backup because we just don't know? I mean, they even did that last season when they didn't know if Brock's elbow was going to hold up the whole season, right? They brought Sam Darnold in. They were probably interested in Daniel Jones, right? Like that was reported as well. So do you think that we see some controversial, I guess, quarterback move this offseason where everyone is like, why would they do that? But really it's mostly because of the injuries?
Sam's going to be available again.
I know. That's crazy.
So Sam's going to be available again. It certainly feels like the Atlanta's offense is now being held back by Kirk. And you can't talk about this quarterback position without talking about him. Listen, I'm not saying I want him. I'm just saying Kyle plays Marvin's room looking at a picture of Kirk. Yeah, he's playing Marvin's room looking at Kirk's picture like Wolverine. Don't look at me. That's not me. There's no way that you can sit here and tell me that he's not a part of this conversation. Doesn't matter what I want. I'm talking about what Kyle wants. Aaron Rodgers is still going to be somebody that he's looking at like, oh, well, maybe. This is far from done. And I think what a lot of fans' PTSD stems from is the decline of Jimmy Garoppolo. And it all happened after a Super Bowl loss. And then the next year, the entire team got hurt. And then, you see, kind of, and then what happened in 2020? Kyle Shanahan mortgaged the farm for 3 first-round picks
after losing to Josh
Allen. So look, don't worry about what I think, because Kyle Shanahan doesn't care what we think. I'm telling you, the parallels that have happened. 2019, the 49ers lose the Super Bowl to the Kansas City Chiefs. 2020, the entire team gets injured. They have a horrible season. 2021, they draft a quarterback and they make a move all the way up for him, and they make a drastic move. 2023, the 49ers lose the Super Bowl to the Chiefs. 2024, the entire team is injured and they have a horrible season. 2025, hold on to your butts.
Why are we always reliving the same reality?
It's a time loop. Get me out of this. Someone save me. Someone save us. We've been waiting 30 years for a quarterback.
Someone put the 49ers voodoo doll in a spin cycle, man. Get us out.
It's almost like the football gods said, we're going to take you to football heaven. You're going to get Joe Montana and Steve Young, and you're going to be combing the desert for the rest of your time without a guy. Someone help us, please. Anyway, that'll do it for this episode of Bully Ball on the Gold Standard Podcast Network. Make sure you guys follow the Gold Standard Podcast Network wherever you get your audio podcasts. Make sure that you like and subscribe to this video on YouTube as well. Make sure you follow Steph on Twitter at Steph49K. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at JasonAponte2103. We both have YouTube channels too. You can go take a look and, see what you like, and definitely like and subscribe to both those if you like as well too. For Steph, for Jay, please just end the season. We're out of here.
Peace.